I'd like to ask some questions about light rail, particularly first about whether the department has given any consideration to the delivery of the Hobart Light Rail project.
You won't need me for 10 minutes anyway.
Not to our knowledge, Senator.
So do you have any information on the status of the Hobart Light Rail project?
Not at this stage, Senator, no.
Nothing at all?
It has not come to the department at this stage that I'm aware of. I'll have to take that on notice, but that's my understanding.
Has the Prime Minister's Office or the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet contacted the department about the Hobart Light Rail project?
We'll just double check that, but I'm not
Just to
aware
give you
of...
some background, obviously the Prime Minister was in Hobart last year in November, talking up the idea of negotiating a city deal for Hobart, and in that the Hobart Light Rail project was mentioned, particularly, and I quote the Prime Minister, him saying, it enables you to bring communities together in a way that you can't really do with alternative forms of transport, a very good example being the Gold Coast Light Rail. And he goes on and on.
Sorry, Senator. If it's in the... there's been a range of projects that have been discussed at a very, very high level in regards to a number of the city deals. It's possible that that Hobart one might have been coming up in conversations around that. I'll just check with my colleague, Sarah Leeming.
Hi, Senator. At a recent meeting we had with Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet, they said that there was some interest in the community in Hobart Light Rail, and they mentioned that to us as a possible project on people's radar. It's very early days for the city deal. This is just discussions that PM&C have been having with their counterparts, with other state agencies, with the community. I believe the Art Gallery was particularly interested in that project, but that's the sort of level of discussions. It hasn't come to us for a review or an assessment, certainly not for funding. Just very initial discussions as far as I'm aware.
Right, so there's no formal process in train at all?
Not for the Hobart Light Rail, no.
No. Okay. You say there have been conversations with the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet that it's early days of a city deal.
That's right. They regularly update us about the progress of various city deals. This conversation was in relation to a potential city deal for Hobart. They keep us informed of their thoughts, what they're hearing from the community. We meet once every couple of weeks. That's the sort of nature of our discussions. You'd expect them to keep the transport portfolio updated on what they're hearing from the community. And
yeah, no, that's all right. I just need to confirm because it's almost 1 year since the Prime Minister said that there was a need to have a city deal for Hobart. So you're saying a year on there is no formal process at all in train between the Prime Minister's office and the department?
The city's deals are an issue for the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet. So to a certain extent, it's probably best if you direct your questions to them in relation to the city's deals. It's not our not a responsibility of this portfolio, so it's probably unfair of us to speak on their behalf.
So you have no kind of involvement with the city deals in this department?
We have involvement with some of the projects once they have actually been agreed as part of a city deal.
Yeah.
But the city deal approvals are not our
I'm not talking about approvals. I'm asking about a particular project being the Hobart Light Rail project. And you've already confirmed that you have had no formal engagement with such a project.
Yes.
Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Thank you. Is it correct that money for the development of a business case for a possible light rail project in Hobart was removed from the 2013-14 mid-year economic and fiscal outlook?
Are we aware of anything?
We'd have to take that on notice, Senator. Sorry, I'm not aware of that, but I'd have to go back and have a look.
Okay, if you could take that on notice.
Happy to do that.
Is the department providing any funding or other support for light rail projects elsewhere in Australia?
Through the Asset Recycling Initiative, there is funding going towards the Canberra Light Rail, but that's a project that was funded through the Treasury portfolio. And obviously we provided funding to the Gold Coast Light Rail.
So Gold Coast, and what was the other one?
The Canberra Light Rail,
Canberra
through
Light
the
Rail.
Asset Recycling Initiative.
Have you done any analysis on light rail projects across the country, where there is light rail, where there isn't light rail? For example, in capital cities?
No, not to that level of detail. We wouldn't look at a particular mode. We'd look at the obviously what we think is where the congestion is, where the pinch points might be, and then we'd work with the jurisdictions to come up with the solution. But we wouldn't necessarily say that light rail would be something that we'd specifically look at.
Okay. All right. I'll leave Hobart Light Rail, seeing we didn't get any.
Sorry.
No, it's not your fault. It's the government's. I don't think I would have got any further, Senator Abetz. Can I ask now some questions about the Bridgewater Bridge in Tasmania? I understand the department is waiting for plans from the state Tasmanian government for the Bridgewater Bridge project. Is that correct?
Yes, Senator.
Okay. Have you seen any plans from the Tasmanian government?
So what we've said to the Tasmanian government is that we understand it's a Tasmanian priority, the Bridgewater Bridge, and if they were seeking funding from the government, the best approach is to first do a business case and provide that to Infrastructure Australia. Infrastructure Australia was here earlier in the day. They've gone now, but I'm not aware that a business case has yet been provided to.
So you haven't seen any
and we haven't seen
business
any
case or
yet
any
either.
plans?
No. But we certainly are happy to engage with the Tasmanian government on this project. But it's quite a significant project, as you'd imagine.
Yes. Has rail access been costed?
Rail access across the bridge?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I'm not aware. We haven't seen any.
You haven't seen any new bridge design?
No.
So do you have any dates where you see this project commencing and finishing?
It's not an approved or agreed project by the Australian government. A key thing would be whether the Tasmanian government has sufficient funding to put towards this project, because we haven't 100% funded projects in Tasmania. It would be something that we'd be looking for the Tasmanian government to also commit to, and I'm not aware that they have in their current budget. So that's another.
Okay.
I guess.
And are there any plans to include this bridge in the forward estimates?
It would need to be, there'd need to be sufficient funding for it to be in the forward estimates. Ms Hall would probably confirm that that's not the...
It's not at the moment, until we actually see a business case and we're able to determine whether it's a project that meets the criteria under IA's assessment, things like that. The government hasn't made any commitment to it at all.
Okay, so you don't have any current estimate of the project cost?
I understand that it's probably around the $500 million mark, but that would be very, very basic early estimates.
Okay. If I can just ask about the Hobart Airport roundabout upgrade. I understand there's been a commitment of $24 million for the grades separation to replace the Hobart Airport roundabout. And the department indicated at budget estimates that you expect the Tasmanian government to provide you with plans and, you know, construction of the roundabout. So have they done that yet, the state government?
Yes, we have received a project proposal report from the Tasmanian government, and that's currently under assessment now.
Okay. So has the project been formally agreed to by both state and federal governments?
Not yet, Senator. That's a decision for the Minister. So our next step is to provide advice to the Minister to agree the project. Okay.
So do you have like a time frame of when you expect tenders to be sought?
Yes.
Yeah?
The Tasmanian government's informed us tenders are expected to be awarded in mid-2018.
Okay. When do you expect construction to begin?
Shortly after tender assessment, so mid to late 2018.
Okay, and when do you expect it to be completed?
The date that we've had from the Tasmanian government is late 2020.
Okay, and why was the profile of funding over the forward estimates not detailed in the budget?
The profile for that initiative and all the other initiatives in Tasmania are given in the budget, but they're put online in what we call the Programme of Works. It gets put online as an attachment to our National Partnership Agreement, so it's on our website.
Okay. Can I just take you back to the Bridgewater Bridge? I think you mentioned that the Derwent River crossing capacity, that's when I was asking you about the design and the rail corridor, that you didn't have any kind of information about that at this stage. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Because there was a statement on the Premier of Tasmania's website page from the Minister for Infrastructure, Reen Hidding, on the 11th of May, which states that the Derwent River crossing capacity is on Infrastructure Australia's infrastructure priority list.
If it's on the infrastructure priority list, it would probably be as an initiative, which means that IA's gone through a process where it's identified that this is an area or an initiative that should be looked at as, because it's actually a constraint, but it wouldn't have actually received the business case yet, so it wouldn't be actually on the IA priority list as a project. So they have two parts to their priority list. They have an initiative part where they actually identify an area of constraint or growing concern, and then they wait till they get their business cases, and then they have another part which is their infrastructure priority list project component, which is what they release their information on in regards to their business case analysis.
Okay. So you weren't able to give me any dates about when you saw this project commencing and finishing. I asked you about that, about the cost and all of that. I think you said roughly you thought it would be about $500 million. But other than that, there was really no detail you were able to give me.
That's correct.
Whereas, as I refer again to the Premier's website, on that same date, on the 11th of May, it states the Hodgman government is confident that this highly important $535 million project will be included in the next 5-year infrastructure agreement with the Australian government.
So
That sounds fairly...
Our current arrangements actually are underpinned by a national partnership agreement, and those agreements are due to expire in 2019. So I know that the states and territories are working on proposals for consideration by the Commonwealth in relation to that next period of works, and are currently considering proposals. So we've known that that the government, of course, has an interest in the Bridgewater Bridge for some time, but what we're saying is that we don't have a detailed proposal before us at the moment for that project. That doesn't mean that the Tasmanian government hasn't done substantial work. It just means we haven't received anything from them as yet. They may not be ready for that to come forward. Also, in relation to what would have been what's available from Infrastructure Australia, at the time that Infrastructure Australia was putting together its initial audit of infrastructure needs for the country, and then subsequently issuing its plan, Infrastructure Australia infrastructure plan for the next 15 years, all of the states and territories provided information in relation to what they would be potentially looking at in the future. And I expect that the Tasmanian government provided information in the Broad at that stage in relation to the bridge, and it's that has created Infrastructure Australia's and why it's actually made the initiatives list, because it's understood to be a need, but it's not available to us in enough detail at this stage to give answers to some of the questions that you're asking. Yeah.
Right. I mean, I just find this astonishing, because I can Google and find out more information than you've been able to give me until I prompt you, and then you give me a lot more information. It's just very bizarre. Either there's a complete breakdown of communication between the state government in Tasmania and the Australian government, or it's like, you know, kind of...
Estimates.
Yeah, it's estimates of, trying to draw hen's teeth, in a sense. All right, well, let's move on to the Hobart Airport runway extension. Has the government and the Minister for Tourism progressed discussions about securing direct international flights from Hobart Airport?
So Senator, this would be a question for our aviation and airports area.
Right.
We do have... Ms Spence is happy to take questions,
Great.
noting it's actually scheduled for later.
I don't mean to interrupt, Senator, but I don't want to mix the schedule up too greatly, otherwise it upsets other senators' ability to be able to do things. But let's just see if you can do it quickly, if that's possible, Senator Singh.
Yep. Would you like me to repeat that, Ms Spence?
If you wouldn't mind, thanks, Senator.
So it's whether the government and the Tourism Minister have progressed discussions about securing direct international flights from Hobart Airport.
Pip Spence, Acting Deputy Secretary. In terms of the arrangements for the funding that was provided, it's actually Hobart International Airport that's supposed to be doing those negotiations, not the government. They've advised us that they have entered into discussions with several international airlines, and they're also continuing discussions regarding future Antarctic research operations.
Okay, great. So that's the role of Hobart International Airport. Yep. So the government doesn't play any role?
That's right, Senator.
In that, okay. Are you aware if Hobart Airport has progressed how far down the pipeline those discussions have
ultimately, they're commercial matters between the airport and the airlines.
I know, but the airport has indicated that flights between, for example, the airport and China might be possible. So I'm interested to know whether these flights have progressed any further, and whether obviously you've been engaged in any of that.
In relation to the operations with China, we do know that in November 2016, Qantas negotiated a deal with a Chinese-owned company, Van Diemen's Land Farm, to fly fresh milk weekly to China from Hobart, but we understand final approval is still required from the Chinese government before those flights can proceed.
Okay. What about Hobart and New Zealand?
I don't have any information about
that. You have no information about that?
No, sorry, Senator.
So, to your knowledge, no international flights have been confirmed?
None have been confirmed, but negotiations, as I understand it, are still underway. And with the Chinese ones, it's a matter for the Chinese government to confirm the regulatory approvals.
Right. So you're engaged in follow-up of those negotiations, are you?
What's
the process?
Just as a general discussions with Hobart Airport, we do seek updates on it, but it is ultimately a matter for the airport and the airlines. The terms of the grant that was provided was around just ensuring that Hobart Airport was entering into negotiations.
Right, so because I understand that the original precondition for the funding of the runway extension was achieving direct international passenger flights from Hobart Airport. Is that correct?
No, Senator. It was the terms of the grant were to actually enter into negotiations, not to actually commence flights.
Right, so there was no precondition on the 38 million.
The precondition was entering into negotiations with the airlines, not to actually there wasn't a requirement that they'd actually have to have an airline signed up for an international service.
Right.
Much in this space? 'Cause we
No,
asked-
this is the last part
All
of
right,
it.
okay.
So this is quite important though. So that you're confirming that the precondition for the $38 million runway extension was for commercial carriers to enter into negotiations into direct international flights, not to actually deliver any international flights.
That's correct, Senator.
Right. So just finally, just to confirm, there are no international flights planned for Hobart Airport.
That's, as I said, negotiations are underway. The main issue that's preventing the Qantas flights to China are around the regulatory approvals from China.
But the government is playing no role in trying to secure flights, direct international flights.
That's correct.
Right. Thank you. I do have one question I can put on notice, if that's all right, Senator.
Yeah, that's fine.
Chair.
Thank you for that.